All right, let's dive into something truly wild today. We're talking about a literary mystery that completely bends the rules of time, reality, and even death itself. This is the story of the impossible manuscript of Ryūnosuke Akutagawa, one of Japan's greatest writers. So the person who supposedly translated this thing kicks it off with this line. And wow, talk about setting the stage, right? This isn't just saying, hey, this is a little weird. It's a flat-out declaration of impossibility. You just have to ask, what on earth could make a document impossible? And there it is, the big, crazy question. What if an author could keep writing from beyond the grave? See, this isn't just about some lost pages found in an attic. The manuscript claims it was written by Akutagawa himself. But get this, he supposedly wrote it before and after his death in 1927. It's like a collaboration between his living self and his own ghost. Okay, so let's get into the specifics. What makes this manuscript such a paradox? Why does it call itself a report from the space between lives? Okay, look at this. This is the core of the problem right here. Akutagawa dies in 1927. That's a fact. But this manuscript, which experts say is in his handwriting on paper from that era, it describes the bombing of Hiroshima in 1945. That's nearly 2 decades after he died. And not only that, it talks about his own funeral with details that were spot on. I mean, time is just completely shattered here. And it gets weirder when you look at the actual thing. This wasn't some nicely bound book. It was a total Frankenstein's monster of pages. We're talking fancy washi paper mixed with cheap notebook scraps, the backs of rejection letters, ouch, and it all ends on this one single long sheet of white silk. It just doesn't feel like a book someone sat down to write. It feels more like a desperate message, cobbled together from whatever was available, wherever it came from. But here is the absolute kicker, the part that's almost impossible to dismiss. The manuscript doesn't just describe future events, it predicts its own discovery. It says it'll be found in December 1952 by a librarian named Yoshida. And it was. I mean, come on. That's the detail that supposedly made the translator a believer. How in the world do you explain that? So to even try and wrap our heads around this, the manuscript says we need to go back. We need to understand what was going on in Akutagawa's head right before he died. He publicly called it a vague unease. But according to this document, what he was really experiencing was something way, way more terrifying. The manuscript actually gives this state a name: multiplicity. Think about it like this. Our brains have a filter that lets us see one single, straightforward reality, right? It keeps us sane. Well, according to this, Akutagawa's filter just dissolved. He was getting everything all at once: past, present, future, what-ifs, all flooding in simultaneously. Yeah, this really puts it into perspective. Our brains work overtime to make sense of the world, to create one clean timeline so we can function. But for Akutagawa, that system failed. His mind was just flooded. Imagine looking at your garden and not just seeing it now, but also seeing it as it was 50 years ago and how it will look after a war that hasn't even happened yet. The manuscript calls it either enlightenment or madness, and honestly, at that point, what's the difference? And this line, this is just chilling. It completely flips the script on what we think of as mental illness. It's saying his suffering wasn't a system failure, it was the system working too well. That vague unease wasn't him being confused. No, it was the absolute terror that comes with seeing everything, all the jagged edges of reality all at once. So this new way of seeing things, this multiplicity, it didn't just mess with his day-to-day life. It completely changed how he saw his own art. He started to realize that the stories he'd written, his famous fiction, it wasn't fiction at all. It was all true. Okay, so many of you probably know Akutagawa's most famous story, In a Grove. It's the basis for the movie RASHMON. You've got one crime and 7 witnesses who all give completely different, contradictory accounts. The classic takeaway is that objective truth is impossible to find. But the manuscript flips that on its head. It asks a wild question. What if the point isn't that someone is lying? What if every single witness was telling the absolute truth? And there it is, the big claim. In this world of multiplicity, the bandit did kill the samurai. And the wife also killed the samurai. And the samurai also killed himself. All of these things happened. They're all true, just in different parallel versions of reality that are all happening at once. So his famous story wasn't a clever puzzle about human nature, it was a literal report on the nature of the universe. And this is where it gets really dark and personal. He started seeing these terrifying parallels in his other stories too, like in The Hell Screen, where an artist literally watches his daughter burn alive just so he can perfectly capture her agony for his masterpiece. The manuscript says Akutagawa had this horrifying realization. He had become that artist. He was sacrificing everything, his family, his sanity, his life, to complete his art. His body of work was his hell screen, and his own death was the final, agonizing brushstroke. So all of this leads to a completely different interpretation of his suicide. According to this document, it wasn't an act of despair. It wasn't an escape. It was a journey. A deliberate, planned trip to a very specific place. The manuscript claims that if you look back at all his work, from RASHMON to the spider's thread, you'll find they're all secretly about the same thing. They're about a gate, a threshold, a place where different realities touch. He wasn't just writing stories, you see, he was drawing maps to this place. And that destination, the place on the map, he called it the interval. It's this space between worlds, between lives, where all those contradictory realities can exist at the same time without tearing everything apart. It's the home of pure multiplicity. It all comes to a head, apparently, during a vision he had. He was visiting the physical ruins of the old RASHMON gate in Kyoto, a real-world threshold, and he was trying to understand the metaphysical one he was about to cross. And there, he basically asks the universe, what's on the other side? What happens after I die? And the answer he supposedly got is just staggering. There's no rest, no judgment, no peaceful void. For an artist, the afterlife is just more work. He saw the dead, all of them, still writing, an eternal workshop, creating stories forever. Okay, let's pull all these threads together. This manuscript, this impossible document, presents itself as his final masterpiece. It's a report, filed from both sides of death, explaining what his final journey was really all about. And this really highlights the two different messages he left behind. For the world, for the public, he just left those two famous words, a vague unease, a total mystery. But hidden away, for anyone who might find it, was this manuscript, a detailed testimony that reframes everything. His death wasn't an endpoint, it was a departure. But maybe the most profound idea in the whole thing is this. The gate isn't some far-off place you go to when you die. It's not in the future. It's right here. It's now. It's always. Every single moment, every choice you make, that's you stepping through a gate from one version of reality to another. We are constantly crossing. Which leaves us with one last, kind of spooky thought to chew on. If this gate opens both ways, and it's always open, what does that mean for us, for our own thoughts, our creativity, our flashes of inspiration? What stories, what impossible truths might be passing through you right now?